Hey everybody, welcome once again to Rise of the GM podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a town that's between a rock and a hard place. We're going to talk about a mercenary who is honor bound, and we're going to talk about the hats that a GM wears, the roles they play, right here on Rise of the GM. All right. Well, hey, it's good to be back with you guys again today. My name is Matthew Thomas. This is Adam Caldwell here with me. And we are excited for episode number 4. Moving right along, guys. Hey, did you know that most podcasts never make it beyond episode 9? And so if you do, you're already in the top like 95% of podcasts. Oh, wow. This one's going to make it. Yep. This one's going to make it. And on that, we are going to be talking today about, we always have an encounter starter to start you off with, something that you can, if you're looking for something to do with your party, whether it's between kind of modules that you have or between story arcs that you have or whatever you're looking for an encounter. We got this great book made by the people at Gnomecast. It's called Eureka. And we're going to start today with that encounter starter, and then we'll go on to talk about like our main thing, the hats that a GM wears. But let's start with this, and I'll start us off. So this one's called Caught in the Twins Crossfire, and so there's a nearby tribe of orcs in this place, or other savage creatures. You can have it be whatever fits your campaign, whatever you happen to already have in that area. They start with orcs here, which is a good one. There was a nearby tribe that was ruled by a powerful chieftain until just recently, when that chieftain was killed by a party of adventurers. So in this setup, you already have these orcs suspicious of anybody who's an adventurer because they came in and killed the father, right? The chieftain's twin children, both as ruthless as the father, they blame each other for failing to protect him in this whole case. And this has been festering, and it's just led to a divide of this clan into 2 factions, and they've actually moved onto either side of this small civilian town there, right? They occupy these camps on each side. The tensions have risen here between these twins, and war is coming. And so when it comes, this little civilized town is going to be caught in the middle of them. This is the town that's caught between the rock and the hard place here. And there's going to be a battle that will destroy the town and all of its inhabitants if it happens. Okay, so if these orcs go to war, they will destroy this little town. The PCs have arrived in the town for whatever reason, be it by accident, they were summoned there by somebody, they were dispatched there. You can kind of make that up as you're setting up this encounter. I like the idea that they just kind of come into this town and they don't even realize what's about to happen. And they come in, it says, on the eve of the war. So they're coming in and people are rushing around and people are afraid, and they see that these people are like in dire trouble when they get there. PCs must figure out how to save the town. There's too many orcs for the party for your PCs to face alone. So they can't just stand up and be the heroes and say, we're just going to kill all the orcs. That's not going to happen. There's too many. And no simple solution exists, right? So if the PCs do nothing, I like this, the town will be destroyed. If they just say, oh, okay, good luck, guys, and they leave, town's going to be destroyed, and that's going to, you figure out how that goes into your game. Though the PCs may survive, even if they're in the battle, they may find a way to get out. If they support one of the twins over the other, that twin orc will be victorious, but then the town will be in danger from the newly reformed tribe because that twin will take over the whole tribe unless the heroes can strike a bargain with the winner. If the PCs support a third party, they bring somebody else in to fight here, some group, they'll need to get that group in there and get them a foothold in that region before the twins come along. And so this adventure is going to have the PCs trying to tackle this problem, but several events are going to be occurring as they go, right? As this encounter unfolds, and you're going to have to sprinkle these in. One of them, a scouting party of orcs is going to raid a farm on the outskirts of town. Okay, so that's going to happen. And remember, this is all like on the eve of a big war. So this is not like over days and days and days. There may be this, and they run to take care of it, and then something else like immediately. Second thing that's going to happen here is the mayor of the town is going to attempt to make a pact with one of the twins for protection, not knowing that the orc is going to not honor that pact because they think the mayor is weak. Okay. They don't understand how orcs think, and the party might.
Right.
Two small raiding parties are going to sneak into town and start a fight somewhere in town. The town's racist barkeep, racist, I'm assuming against orcs or whatever this thing is, attempts to mobilize the town to fight the orcs. And that's an act that, if allowed to succeed, will get the town wiped out immediately, denying the PCs anytime they need to set things right. So you're going to put all of these things here before your PCs, and you're going to lay them out, and you're going to see what happens. So what I like about this is it dangles. So if you're the kind of person who an encounter comes along in your mind and you have this one direction that you're like, okay, this is how it starts and this is where it's got to end, and you kind of railroad your people through and you have a hard time getting away from that, this could be a really good encounter for you. Because what you have here is they toss out lots of little dangly bits. These things are all going to happen, and they don't tell you what's going to happen. They just tell you that, like, the town could get wiped out or you could do something about it, but they don't tell you what. And so this is something that helps people who get stuck on those rails to open up a bit and let their players' decisions guide the way the game goes. And I like that about it. On first blush here, what do you think when you hear this encounter starter, Adam?
Yeah, I do really like the multiple options in here, that there's choice that's given.
Right.
I really like that there's repercussions, that like it's a thing we're thinking through of, okay, if we, maybe the PCs don't think it through, but there's like, if you support this orc chieftain, that's going to cause a power shift. If you do this one, it's going to cause a power shift. If you bring somebody in, that may throw things off. And that even reminds me of the encounter we did back in one of the other podcasts, where it's like, you leave a power vacuum and this like mercenary takes over. It's like things like that can happen. There's a lot of like different types of encounters, which I really appreciate about this. It's not just go out and fight, and like the end result is likely not go out and fight. But there are moments where you have to battle the scouting party or somebody raids. But you're also doing a lot of diplomacy or like persuasion type things. It's like a good opportunity for your bard or, your speaker, your face person to like get in there and do some politicking, to make sure people are not going crazy and attacking the orcs, or they're not making deals that aren't going to be, kept, that kind of thing. So I really like just the sheer amount of like you said, here's all this stuff. What are you going to do with it? Like, how are you going to kind of play within the scenario? So that's pretty cool for this. I do wonder, particularly, this is a problem I have, and I'd love to hear, Matthew, what you have to say about this. Sometimes I've noticed when I'm running, there's like two factions here, or two people, or like whatever that is. It's almost like an accidental bias that's given. It feels like sometimes, where it's like you're kind of talking through these people, and I'm taking this as like the two twins and their like clans or whatever, their tribes at this point, are supposed to be pretty neutral. Like the PCs don't have a thing where it's like, oh, they're the good guys. It's like there is no good guy here. It's all kind of a bad situation. But sometimes I feel like I, for whatever reason, give weight one way or the other. And I don't know if you've experienced that, or if you feel like you have ways to like not direct people, or to be intentional about not directing people, because I've noticed that happen with me.
Yeah. So you're talking about in how they choose between the two twins.
Right.
Yeah. I think for me, the best way to do that is to make a compelling case that each one of them is like great.
Okay.
That they're right in some way, or that they should be. Make it a true dilemma for your players. That's going to get them like discussing and maybe arguing and trying to figure that out more. Yeah. And so you have to somehow, and off the top of my head, I don't know that I have how I would do that exactly, but like the story that one of them tells has to like lead the PCs to think, man, this person's been wrong and they're the right one all along. But then when they hear the next story, they've got to think the exact same thing. They got to think, oh no, this person was right and been wronged all along. And so that may take just a little bit of thought, but I think if you can, it's again that not making, here's an obvious black hat and here's an obvious white hat. You want to destroy the black hat, instead making like, hey, here's two light gray hats. Here's two people who are two orcs that like have good claim on this. And here's the city. And I want to save them. But I also realize these orcs are going to live somewhere around here and we can't just kill them all. That's not an option. And then leaving it up to your players to be creative a little bit here in how they do that. And so your players are going to come up with some ideas, and some of them may be good and some of them may be bad. They may surprise you and you may be like, wow, I never saw that coming. And so I think one thing so as you're thinking about being a GM, this can be one of the scarier places to be, where you're like, okay, I'm going to throw something out there and I'm going to leave them to take it wherever they want. And then I've somehow got to react and come up with stuff. And that can be scary when you're first starting. I would say embrace it though. Embrace a story when you come to this one. Okay. So the fighting and the statistics, what I would do is I would get like the orc chieftain. I'd get them a stat block, each one. I would have like an orc warrior, maybe 2 or 3 that are like really powerful warriors. And then maybe like one big tank and then a whole bunch of minions. So I'd get like 2 or 3, maybe 4 different stat blocks. But I would then not focus on too much more stat wise. Townspeople are just going to be townspeople. I would just take, a straight up, find like the most normal human stat block you can find, and you just reskin it for whoever decides to fight. They're not powerful. They're going to lose. An orc is going to kill any of these townspeople. Maybe there's like one guy who practices with a sword who could have a little bit more armor and hit people. But the whole thing for me is going to be about how do they go about solving this dilemma? And so if I was the GM, embrace that idea that whatever they come up with, I'm just going to run with it. Okay. They come up with a plan to, make a big mirage that's going to do this. And you're like, I have no idea how that's going to work. Okay. Let's just start doing it, and don't worry if you don't have like every stat. So like, let's say they make a big silent image to like confuse one of these orc parties. And you're like, okay, I don't know exactly what wisdom check against this or that. Just have them roll something, and decide before the roll comes up, this is what's going to be a success and this is what's going to be a failure. So, whether you make that a percentile, or whether you like feel like strong enough to say, okay, your sleight of hand against their, I guess it wouldn't be sleight of hand, your magic score against whatever their wisdom check, their insight, make up a number and go with it, but keep yourself in the story moment of all that and describe it, so it's like, if their illusion works, describe the orcs running into town when all of a sudden they see this huge gigantic beast standing there slathering with, bloody claws and in their path, and how they trip and fall trying to avoid it, and others back up and run screaming, and the chieftain standing there like looking around. You got to describe all of that. But it could be something completely different. They may go a full talking route. What I typically try not to do is have one whole session where all they do is talk. I generally want them to pick up a weapon at some point and do something. But there are occasions when they decide they're not going to do that. They just want to talk. They just want to try to fool somebody, and they want to persuade this person, and they want to go do a sneaky thing here and stealth around, and that's all they seem to want to do. Well, respect that. But also keep your eye open for if they look like they're getting bored with nothing happening, and then be ready to throw something in. And the cool thing about this is if they choose incorrectly, if they're like, we're just going to stand here, and when the orcs come, we're going to fight them all. Make it hard and let them see the town getting destroyed and people getting hurt.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the town actually being leveled as you guys maybe barely escape. You know, let them live with that consequence, and then build it into like now because of that. What does this mean for you later? Your reputation,
Right.
or a person who escaped who knows what you did, or now how do you deal with you know, a whole bunch of fun stuff that can happen there. How about you? Like we tell GMs here, I'm like advocating, you know, embrace it and, you know, be free to creatively go wherever your people go. What advice would you give them in doing that? Anything that I haven't?
Yeah. I'm thinking about the tension aspect of this. And I
Mm-hmm.
do think, like you were saying, you know, I'm coming off of a session that like wasn't very much rolling. It was a lot of like exploration slash, and right at the end, it's like, and this thing happens, and we're going to roll initiative next time, you know. And that
Yeah.
there is an aspect where part of it's just we have a finite amount of time at the
Right.
table. It wasn't necessarily planned like that, but I do agree. I feel like the mixing up of like play and what you do at the table is really important. And the nice thing with this, and I think it's something, you know, you can take into other encounters, is there's some like these built-in, you know, the scouting party gets found out, or a farmstead gets raided. And it's like, I think a good tool is maybe, okay, they're doing some investigation, they're doing some, the bard is in there doing some diplomacy, trying to talk down the mayor from making a bad decision. And it's kind of getting, you can just tell people are yawning around the table, they're checking their phones.
Right.
Somebody runs in, you know, old Farmer Thompson's farm's under attack by a pack of orcs, like, and then you go, you know, kind of thing. And I think you can play with that's in a lot of things, but you can play with the tempo of the game with that.
Yeah.
So that's nice that they have some of those built in. And I think it's worth keeping that whenever you're maybe doing more social encounters, you know, of you're in a city, or you're in a lot of talk. Maybe there's some things that can pop up. Ratcheting up the tension is a thing I'm thinking about with this scenario too. I think that like time frame is really important to
Mm.
not sit at a table for 4 hours playing out the eve of the battle, you know, unless it like really is important. But to like, one, I think like it's the way we're role playing, the people talking, you know, it's like, okay, this you know, this barkeep that you've befriended in the town. I feel like I use that every time, but this barkeep that you've talked to is like, yeah, I've already packed up my wagon. I'm ready to hit the road here. Pretty, you know, it's like they're about to turn into refugees because they're all freaking out, and there's people boarding up their houses, or they're like figuring out ways to get out of town, or arming themselves because the tension is there. Those things I think are important, but I don't know. And I guess another question for you, Matthew, on like how you've used this. I like things that like in meta are kind of a time
Mm-hmm.
at different times, you know, where sometimes it's like, I don't think just like a little hourglass would work necessarily for this, but something that we're seeing like tick off time, even if it's like on my phone, I set an alarm every 10 minutes, it goes off, just showing like a passing of an hour, or, you know, those kind of things. Have you used any things like that?
Yeah. And actually, I was thinking the whole time you were talking of that exact thing. I would set a 10-minute timer on my phone and let every 10 minutes be an hour of that night. And they started at 11 p.m. So
Yeah, right.
12, 1, 2, 3, 4. And by 5, okay, so 1 hour in, that's if each 10 minutes, that's like an hour. In 1 hour, this battle is coming, whether you
Right.
guys are ready or not. Now, I would also feel free to, if they do something that precipitates the battle quicker, I would be okay with that. But you would basically have this, and I would have my phone set to do like some gong sound or some like scream sound or something that was very like thematic.
Yeah.
And I would hit it and I'd be like, guys, you only have 6 hours before they're supposed to attack. What are you going to do? Everybody's up, everybody's awake because everybody's afraid. Boom, hit that timer. And then when it gets to 0 and gongs, I'll be like, that's 1 hour gone. It's still going.
Yeah.
and yeah, so I think something like that can ratchet that need. Now you may think, oh, a whole hour before the battle, that's like a long time, but you'd be amazed how quickly an hour can go when everybody wants to talk and
Right.
do this thing and say this. It's going to feel fast. And they're going to start feeling it when they get down to that, last hour and they only have 10 minutes. They're going to start like talking fast, and they're going to, it's going to go even faster. So I do like that.
I'm a fan of that. I think that's something you don't want to use like every game session, obviously. It's like, It's very specific, but I think those kind of just things, they're like triggers outside of the game world, but we're like going to respond to that as players is like a pretty cool thing.
And you can decide. I love that they give you like 3 or 4 things that can happen, and you can drop in when that attack on the farm comes, or when the fight in town breaks out and it's found to be like, initial raiding parties or whatever. You can decide in these sets of 10 minutes. And of course, if a battle would happen at a barn, that may suspend that timer a little bit, because battles take time. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to play with that. But the other thing I would say is, as a GM, don't feel like, and we just come back to this over and over and over again, you're the creator of a good story. So don't feel like you have to put all 4 of those options in there, because you can stick to like putting everything in so much that you ruin the story. It's like, okay, there was a battle at the barn and they're like really into it, and somehow they from there are wanting to, march with pitchforks against this one orc, and you're like, okay, now back in the town now, 2 raiding parties have done this, and they're like, but we're not back in the town and we don't care about that, and you're like trying to throw in every one of these options. There may be a time where you're like, nope, I'm letting those 2 go. I'm not going to do them. So I think that's important as a GM to think about every time. Now I'm guessing, I'm going to tell you something here. Where Adam lives, there's trains. And I think I heard the beginning of a train, and he might have muted his mic there. Some of what you guys get to experience as we do this podcast is sometimes trains go by. So do know that. Is that what happened, Adam?
It has. We've had drag racers and trains and some dude with a big stereo who walked by at one point.
Hey, this is part of us getting you like totally in the scene.
Yeah, we're immersed in this.
Immersed. That's the word.
One more thing I have on this, and I look at this and I'm interested in how you could upscale it as people level, because there is a point, early on, it's like 1 orc, is like, this is a problem, but then there's a certain point where it's like, I just feel like, oh, 2 tribes of orcs. You guys go that way, I'll go this way. It's like just not, and they do say in there, or any kind of like that type of creature. But I just wonder, like with upscaling, how you can keep the tension. I do think there's probably a point in your leveling where this may not work as well, unless your party really cares about, which they should, but like, do they care about the collateral damage of the village? It's like, okay, yeah, you're super powerful.
Some players don't.
Some players, that's not going through their brain, but it's like, yeah, you're super powerful and you can wipe out 100 orcs on your own. But in those, well, that's like 6 minutes. But in the 6 minutes that you're doing that, the town has just been raided and everybody's killed, and you're a hero of yourself, kind of thing. So I don't know. That's a thoughts kind of thing. I guess I'm asking too, is I think there's a certain point where you can like upscale the level, or you can like level up creatures and put templates on them, or like, raise the bar on, even they're orcs, but they're like super powerful, or bring in like a new creature. But even that kind of tension too, of not just saying, okay, we're going to go handle this ourselves. And it really does have to remain a diplomatic or like intelligence kind of oriented thing. So that kind of throwing that out there, I guess, is a question too.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can level it up, and I think you can do what you just said. And that is, they go out and they're going to wipe out the orcs. But while they do, the orcs destroy the town, destroy most of the town. Maybe 2 or 3 people don't, because no matter how powerful you are, you're still trying to like do something in this world, and you're still going to have to like work with some people, and you need to make it socially or in terms of the other people you have to deal with in the world, something that they would be like, you did what? I don't know if we trust you anymore. I don't,
Right.
this is not the kind of thing we're looking, somehow there can be other kinds of repercussions. This town may get destroyed, and then that lingers with them for a long time and makes them think twice,
Right.
So
I know I bring these two games up a lot, but both the Sentinels Comics RPG and Red Markets has a thing. It's called like a rep spot, and that's something that hangs with you. And sometimes it's positive, and sometimes
right.
it's negative. If you did something stupid, everyone's going to be like, "No, we don't want to work with you," like that. And I think that is those are cool ideas to bring into our more like D&D Pathfinder fantasy games too, where it's like not forgetting, yeah, you guys like murder hoboed your way through the countryside and nobody likes you anymore, kind of thing. And that is going to matter. So,
And then the whole party turns evil and just decides they're going to kill everybody.
Right.
We've had those sorts of games too. We have. So hopefully you can find something in this encounter that you can work. It's a nice one to drop in that has a lot of open ends. So There you go. That's caught in the twins crossfire, or like I like to say, caught between a rock and a hard orc.
Oh yeah. Nice. So like moving kind of into our main topic, we've been doing, kind of talking about our background and like our philosophy and those kind of things, and kind of shifting into like GM role kind of ideas over the next several weeks. And so we're borrowing heavily from Gnome Stew today. This is an article from a book that they wrote called Focal Point. And I'm not going to read the entirety of the article, but I thought this was really interesting and worth us taking a look at over the next weeks. We're going to kind of generally talk about it, but then the next 3 podcast episodes, we're going to dig deeper into the different hats that we wear. So I'm going to read just a little bit, but not all of this. They say this in Focal Point. Being a GM requires constant mental juggling. During the course of running a game, you must balance a multitude of game elements while monitoring the status of your players and making real-time adjustments to the game and to the story, all while being entertaining and engaging. It's the job for the ambitious. That's all. Yeah. It's a job for the ambitious is what they said. Understanding the 3 key roles involved in GMing is critical to getting the most out of the game. So let's look at each of them in turn. And again, I'm not going to read all these directly. We can get into that a little more as the weeks go on, but they talk about three roles, 3 hats that we wear. One is the entertainer. And that is the idea of like the voices and the mannerisms, the posture that we talked about before. It's about, maps and miniatures and handouts if you're on Roll20, that kind of thing, and the music that you play, the mood of the game, all those kind of things. You're trying to bring people into the story through those like entertaining elements there as they are trying to get into their roles. And that they say is like, that's representing the parts of the GM that are projected outward to the players. So that's how we're like interacting with the players to bring them in, kind of thing. The second hat is the storyteller. And I know we've talked about telling story, and like for both of us, that's a big deal for our like just our story getting into RPGs. But as far as the role of the storyteller, it's not about like just sitting down and cracking a book open and having story time.
Right.
It's fashioning the story together. It may be like telling stories in a moment, setting a scene, explaining what's going on, but more so like giving these prompts to let them jump into the story and craft it together with us, introducing a new NPC, explaining the location, those kind of things. And there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And then the third role is the facilitator. As the facilitator, we make an environment that's safe and like lets people let their guard down and enjoy the night. Helps to create like harmony at the table, eliminating distractions like all these trains. And when there's even like conflict, whether it's in game or interpersonal between players, I think there is an aspect of facilitating, even like to help, let's move through that so we can have a good game together. It also is about like managing the rules, like the mechanics of the game. That's the facilitator's role, is to understand like, here's how the game actually works. Let's move forward and like play it correctly, kind of thing. So I just thought this was a really interesting thing to like talk about, these hats, and like how we kind of fall within them. So I'm going to kick that back over to you, Matthew, to like kind of comment on how do you like see yourself within kind of those three roles, I guess, to start off with.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're going to talk more in depth about each of these, but I think I generally see people who have strengths in one of these areas, or maybe two of these areas, and yeah, I think it's worth us developing all three. So me as a person, I find myself relying heavily on entertainer and storyteller. And I do a little less with facilitating maybe than some others that I know. I know some guys who are really great at facilitating and having like all of the stat blocks and having all of the plot points. So maybe they're facilitator, storyteller, but they have a hard time with the entertaining. And I'm trying to think of what it would look like if somebody was entertainer, facilitator, and they had a hard time with storytelling. I'm sure that's an option also. And so I think it does good, first of all, for you to sit down and decide, what is it that I'm good at? What is it that I feel strong? And this goes somewhat to personality. I used to work with a guy here at the campus house that he was great at planning and researching, and he would get up and present, and it was very well received because it was so well planned and so well researched. But like if something at the last minute changed and he had to kind of fly by the seat of his pants or change on the go, oh, it just wrecked him. It like gave him mental anguish, and it wasn't going to be as good of a product sort of thing here at work. Whereas I typically was the person that when things went awry, I'm really good at riding the wave. Like, what's happening? Okay, I'll just deal with that. But I wasn't always the best planner and researcher. Now, I work at planning and research because I know that's not my strength. But I recognize that I have a strength in kind of off the cuff, a strength in storytelling and just kind of going wherever my player characters take us. So I think what I'm trying to say here is I think it's important to understand your strengths, to look back at your life in other areas and say, okay, what is it that I'm really good at? And what is it that I need to work on? And you hear like in job world all the time, they say, work on your strengths. Don't try and shore up your weaknesses. I think in GMing, it really does pay to like at least give a base, a base level to your weaknesses. Because if I come into every encounter with no stats for monsters and no idea of like what it's going to take to beat this spell or that, and I just come in with like wild stories, my characters are like, man, I have no idea like if anything is going to work or not. It just seems like it's up to him and whatever he feels at the moment. And you got to have some rules, because part of this whole thing is they have to sometimes be able to do things that beat that beat you when you didn't expect it, and so, and that can be another great part of the story, but you got to have some sort of framework to hang all that story and entertaining on. And I have to realize that. And the same thing, if you come in, you're great with stats, but you pay no attention to story, you might just bore people to death.
Right.
And so you got to know where your strengths are. You got to know where your weaknesses are.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you?
Yeah. Looking at entertainer, storyteller, those two, are like the background that we talked about. Those two things I think are what like gripped me as a player early on, seeing that. And so that, again, that's like a thing I'm always wanting to emulate. I think sometimes the entertainer, I go back and forth because like I'm somebody who really likes mood music. Like that's really important to me. I put too much effort probably into having music put into either Roll20 or pulled up on my computer when we're in person, and like dealing with that, which is a thing to remember. If I'm like fiddling with music, I'm losing track of the story. So, there's some of those things where it's like, the prep work going in advance, like making sure that that's good. But then there's other things where, particularly when we were, for so many years, we were just like together in person all the time before we had to start doing more like remote playing. I feel like that was kind of a weak point for me a little more, because I definitely am happy to walk into like a battle and be like, well, in my brain, they were going to fight these hill giants on a waterfall, and there's going to be some loose rocks and some trees. And so I'll like show up and just kind of draw it, and not have necessarily planned like that. So that kind of stuff I think had kind of gone to the wayside. But whereas like now for on Roll20, that stuff, at least for me, has to be loaded in advance. I'm not going to be searching for that in the middle of a game. So I've actually, I think, gotten better at that in some ways, because that's forced me to do it. So it's like, I feel like in a lot of these, it's kind of, some are more easy for me, or I'm better at. Some are like a learned thing. I was thinking about this like facilitator, and we have played Pathfinder for so long. That was like just nondescript, really niche like rules somebody would ask about, and I was like, oh yeah, that's like this thing. Like I knew, or I could very easily find it. And we've been playing 5e recently, so it's like it's not so different, but there are differences. Trying to figure that out, get to know that more. And I actually probably going to have an opportunity to run some more Pathfinder soon. And I'm like, man, I think I forgot all the rules on how Pathfinder works. So, it's like the facilitator, that's really important. And it's something I feel like it takes some like work to dig around in. And it's like a lot of experience too of that. So I think with facilitator, and I'm feeling a little all over the place here, but that's one where I think it's like kind of going out on a limb and like putting yourself into the position. If you feel like, oh man, like I don't know the rules, work it out together, right. Hopefully like your table will be gracious enough to like do that. I think it's really nice. Yeah.
Generally, I found that there's a guy at the table who loves looking up rules. And so I feel very free to be like, oh, I can't remember, like, what do you oppose this with? Or, if they're doing a spot check and they've got to have concentration going on, and I'll throw that out there and somebody will be like, on it. And they're looking it up. And now that we all have phones and computers that have everything at the, click of a prompt, it seems like it's a lot easier back than it was when you had books you had to look through, and you're like, which book was that in? And everybody's like looking through different books, and everything dies for a second as everybody's trying to find this. It's gotten better in the digital age for sure.
Yeah, that is a really good point too, of just like even having a designated, whether it's like official or unofficial, like encouraging that, where it's like, we're in the middle of a battle. I'm needing to move like 20 miniatures and roll dice and keep the flow going. Like, could you look up how that spell actually works and then explain it to me, and like have the trust even there at the table to like do that, kind of going even deeper into that. I think it's really good for us to include the player into those things, because sometimes it's like, well, I want to do this, and it's like, okay, as a DM, I'm like looking, like trying to open the book up, and it's like, well, explain that spell to me, explain what you're doing. Right. And I think that's even like they're understanding the game more as that happens. So that's like helpful to help them grow in facilitation too of the rules.
They trust that you are sticking to some rules,
right? Yeah.
Not just doing whatever you want. They're like, okay, oh no, it says here this, and we rolled, and boom, this is what happened, according to rule. So
yeah. I feel like it's easy, at least for me, and there are different moments where these things are in play, but where it's like easy to I don't know if overemphasize, but you like emphasize one of them at the expense of another kind of thing. I've experienced that. I feel like where, and it is different times for these things, but it's like, okay, I'm like really trying to entertain and like do really well in this like what we're doing here at the table with like this map and everything. But then like maybe the story takes a little dip because that's happening, or I'm trying to facilitate really well and all these things, but then the entertainment factor drops. I forget that the music stopped. And like, so I think there is some of that where learning to balance and not like overwhelm yourself with these things too, because like you said, oh, that's it. After reading these things, it's like you're doing all these things, you are balancing them, but just trying to like work within like what your limits are too, and try to push those little by little kind of thing. So
yeah, and he gives a metaphor in that focal point, right? The lights, camera, action. Describe that metaphor real quick.
Yeah, it was really good. So these different elements, like the entertainer part being that of like the lights, the set, the props, and the soundtrack. This is the arena of the entertainer. Camera is things like framing scenes, the opening, the climax, and the cliffhanger. This is the realm of the storyteller. And then action is safety, collaboration, managing all the moving parts. This is the domain of the facilitator. I think that is a really good way of like understanding that from like a visual kind of aspect.
Yeah. And a moment ago I said, oh, I'm like the storyteller entertainer. But when you describe it like that, I'm probably less of the entertainer. Sometimes I later think, oh, I hear of these guys online who, let's say the most of the action tonight's going to be in some alchemist layer where he's trying to reanimate undead or something, necromantic alchemist. And so they'll have like little jars of bubbling stuff around in the room, or they'll have like a skull sitting somewhere, red drapes. They do stuff to make the setting and the lights. And like you talk about, you're always about the soundtrack. I don't really think about any of that. So when I just said a moment ago that I'm probably a big entertainer, I'm not. I'm all probably more storyteller, and I just think of like my voices and my acting as the entertaining stuff. But that's really part of the storyteller. I'm talking, and I'm bringing to life these characters, and I'm all about like their imagination of the setting, and I'm all about like the cliffhanger and the the tension. That's all storytelling stuff. So when you describe the lights, camera, action, I'm all about moving the camera around and what they're focused on, but I'm not very good at like setting the props and setting the stage necessarily. I always think that would be really cool. I always think, man, if I had the time, if I had the energy before everybody got here, if I could get home from work and be prepared enough to also set up stuff around the room, which never happens. And now that we're online a lot, we do like a mix now. We do a hybrid of online, and then we try every third week to get together in person at least. I find it harder to set that stage. Now, like you said on Roll20, the nice thing is you have to have maps, and you have to have, like handout pictures for people to see. So that does help, because if you want them to like know, you got to prepare some of that in advance. And I've done more of that, but yeah. That just kind of helps me when I think of lights, camera, action, and then of course the action being like moderating, like who's moving and how long we're taking on turns, and are these two people like really angry at one another, which is a real thing that can happen. Two people get annoyed at one another in a game.
We say this. I think we've said this a lot, but I do think it's really important that all these are aspects of GMing a game. But I think like we can look at particularly maybe more like popular, like public gamers, if we're like going to watch like an actual play or something like that, or listen to an actual play. I do a lot of that. I enjoy that kind of stuff. And sometimes I listen or watch to those, and I'm like, man, like I run these games like in my house. Like there's no way I'm going to have a table that looks like that, or, like the soundtrack that's like people wrote songs for this, like kind of thing, or like the cool, the atmosphere, or just even like the knowledge, like I get better at it, but it's like, man, I'm not going to know every single rule. Like it seems like this person does, kind of thing. And I just think it's really important to like, not like put ourselves down or feel like, oh man, I'm never going to match up to like what these other people can do. Like we need to just do the best we can for our table, you know, and try to get better at our craft by doing these things, but not like putting ourselves up against like an unrealistic expectation, maybe, you know, so that I think it's important.
I have this inspirational calendar. It's like quotes by famous people. And I was just reading one to my son today. It was, I missed a couple of days, so I was ripping off 2 or 3 in a row. And one of them is like, whatever you do, do it. Because if only the best, I forget how it's worded. If only the best bird in the forest sang, it would be a pretty quiet forest. And it's that idea that like all the voices, and it's not like the most beautiful, but like all of them together, you have to exist in order to have like this full realm of gaming that we have. Not everybody's going to be able to sit with Matt Mercer and crew on Critical Role. We all can't get into that game, but we all have our game. And the truth is, if our singing's not as good as Matt Mercer's, our group still loves our singing around our table. And we've got to sing that song, even if we don't feel like we're as good as him. And we don't have as great of atmosphere. We don't have as great of props, whatever.
Yeah. It's, I just think you never want to like get discouraged. So yeah, I think it's good. So
hey, let's move on to our NPC. And then we have some questions in our haversack today, but our NPC today is who, Adam?
Our NPC here. So this again is from the book Masks, and it's 1001 NPC prompts here. This is Brynhild Skaldmeier, the honorable mercenary. Her quote here is, gold will not buy my services, but gold will buy my services, but it will not. Gold She's really honorable. Really honorable.
Yes, it will.
Wait, actually it will. No, gold will buy my services. I cannot get this right. Wow. This happens at the table sometimes, and sometimes you just have to reset, get back into entertainer mode. So gold will buy my services, but it will not buy my honor. My company will not kill the unarmed, nor take what is unearned, nor destroy homes and farms. So this is an honorable mercenary. She stands tall and proud. She's one of the most attractive warrior maidens that most have ever seen. With role playing, she's honorable and professional, and she sneers at cowardice or treachery. Her personality, Brynhild is the leader of a mercenary company, and her first loyalty is to her troops. She has a strong sense of duty and integrity. Her motivation, she pledges her life to fulfilling her contracts and to honoring her responsibility to her troops. And then the background has a little bit more here. Brynhild fled home when she was faced with the expectation of marriage to a pig farmer. She took up service in the military and worked her way up in the ranks, but after a particularly nasty campaign where she was ordered to burn peasants' homes and slaughter their livestock, she resigned her commission. She started her own mercenary company, only taking troops who would serve with honor, with clauses to that effect in her contracts. While many of her employers have balked at her adherence to such a strict moral code, the company is earning a reputation for effectiveness and integrity. Brynhild may respect her enemies, but she will not betray an employer nor break a contract. She is in the service of a villain, and while she is still an honorable opponent who is difficult to dislike, that makes her a villain by extension. Brynhild Skaldmeier.
Yeah, these are fun characters. These that your characters may actually like admire a bit and like look at and think, now this is the kind of person that people should be, but they're doing things they shouldn't because of her employer. I always think when you first read it, so I had just recently watched the D&D movie Honor Among Thieves with my son, which turned out to be still a little bit scary for him. I thought it wouldn't be, but anyway, I think of that paladin. Now the paladin was honorable all through and through, but like, this kind of character that is like, they're lawful and they have a code they live by, but that code doesn't necessarily mean they're doing the right thing. That makes it an interesting character. somebody like this in a campaign.
Yeah, I agree. I do. I just really like uh, complexities in that, and that like I feel like a party wouldn't necessarily know what to do with her. It's like hard because it's like, well, like there is this aspect of honor and even um, not like a bad person to be around, you know, like in a they meet her in a tavern kind of thing. It's like, oh, it's kind of fun to spend time with Brunhild, but then it's like, oh, but you're like you have a contract being, you know, a hit person for this or like whatever that is. Even with the honor, it gets a little messy. So I really like that. I think like just the fact that she has that background of like coming out of this kind of like messy like military situation that she was in, makes some interesting things. Like I think about like one of our characters and even like tying it into other people because like one of our characters in the Jade Masks game comes kind of military city guard kind of thing, and Ozoff, like I feel like that could be like a connecting point. If like she came into this game, there would be this connection point of like, okay, like we both have this. We both kind of were a little bit disenchanted with like what we were in, but went to kind of different directions, at least effectively, you know, kind of thing. And seeing how that could even change things as far as the way that like your PCs are interacting with the just like the background of hers once they figure it out, kind of deal. So
yeah. And what's interesting that you bring up that character is, so in this game, Jade Mask, Ozoff, this guy who has this city background, city guard background, we just recently found out that he's an evil guy. And so here you could meet this person who is like working for the villain, but kind of very honorable and good, won't hurt somebody who can't protect himself. But since you can protect yourself, she's going to fight you hard, but you still respect her. And then you got this guy who's your friend who does things kind of lawfully, but he's like a bit evil. And you're like, how do I have him on my team? And then you guys meet and you may end up, you know, it adds some interesting stuff in there. We're going to talk about evil characters later down the road. How do you do evil characters in a campaign? That's always an interesting thing. But yeah, she could definitely be a very interesting character. And we've had a character like her in a campaign I had where the whole party was kind of at the mercy of this wizard Sizen and the guy he served, the Lord Reeling. But they used this mercenary named Sonya who basically had everybody tied up at the foot of this arch and was supposed to kill him. And the bad guys like charged her with that and left. And she's like, I'm not going to kill people who are just helpless and tied up here. And so she didn't do it. She let him go and kind of helped him a little bit, but then like took off. But it's an interesting NPC to be able to throw in there. I don't think she had a huge impact in the game. Because she was quickly replaced by another character focus. And so Amira, who came in. But again, I think it was a very useful sort of character, even though it didn't really probably change the player characters in the way they responded to anything. They recognized here's this person who like is honorable enough not to kill those who can't protect themselves, just like, you know, coup de grace style.
Yeah. I would say as a player, like kind of switching over to Sonya, and which, like you said, is very similar in kind of makeup. That kind of put a conundrum for me, like as a PC, because you know we're in this place. There was kind of like some high tensions. We're like you said, completely at the mercy. We're all stunned. We're incapacitated. Essentially, he's like, kill him, you know, and her making that decision. It's like, oh, maybe we have an ally in this. But then, you know, as they got away, the bad guys get away, she's still with us because they left her since she wasn't gonna follow along with what they wanted. And then we kind of travel a little bit through this gate to another place, and my full understanding was like, oh yeah, well, Sonya, you can just like come with us, we'll start working together. And she's like, no. Like,
right.
Why? You know, it's like there was no her contract was fulfilled with them or had been broken by them. And she had plans and it had nothing to do with us. And I'm just like, flabbergasted as a player and as a character, like, so you're not going to come with us, and we did have that change of like shifting of kind of, okay, here's another NPC that's kind of is joining with us eventually. But that was kind of fun in that of like, I mean, I still am like, wonder what Sonya's doing, that even though it was a very short snippet, that was something. So I think those like complexities in a character that like make you think it is important, even if it's just a passing.
And it throws a twist because I'll guarantee you every party seems to just quickly love this idea of this NPC did something nice for us. And now they're part of our party. Right. And so when we go up against them, we've got 6 players here fighting. We can take them. And then all of a sudden to find out this player's like, I don't know. You're on your own, man. Yeah. I helped you a little bit, but I'm not fighting with you, because players always assume, oh, well, we got this cleric now who's just going to heal us all the time. He's an NPC. We're just going to bring him along. He's just going to like be our heal monster. And then he doesn't. Or we got this warrior who's like going to be our fighter, and then she doesn't. So,
right. Yeah. That, the WoW game that, I talked about last week, there was a point we kind of had like an initial arc, and then had like traveled from the continent that we had been on to another one. And the very first thing that happened as we get into this other city is the people that we had messed over in the other continent decided to send a dragon after us. And so it comes in and is like annihilating this town. And this is probably why I always talk about the barkeep, because this barkeep that we had been talking to, his bar gets annihilated. We find out he's like a retired adventurer, and he's like, well, got nothing here. I guess I'll join you guys, and he joined us. And he was, I remember this clearly. His name actually was Gorathon, but immediately we just named him Glenn because we didn't want to say the word. And he was Glenn the rest of the campaign.
That happens.
But there is that, like, I think I have that. And there were some other, experiences with NPCs joining us. I love, there's a couple things I love. I love animal companions. I just love animal companions. And it probably is because it's the same type of thing. I love NPCs. Like, I love a gaggle of people hanging out with us that we have to protect, or they can fight with us or interact and have like relationships with. So that may have come from Glenn, kind of thing. But I know, like in my game, I feel like I've thrown like NPC after NPC after NPC, and it's my love that I'm like, oh man, maybe they'll grab onto this person. Maybe they'll grab onto this person. And they keep getting sent away. They keep getting like teleported out to other people and stuff. And so it's which is good, because that means I don't have to run an NPC all the time.
1,000 NPCs all the time, right?
Yeah. It's like what's the old feat? Leadership. Yeah, you take the leadership feat and you get your cohort and all your followers that are carrying all your baggage, and then
somehow you've always got to account for them, and
right,
it becomes a huge headache.
We all go down into the dungeon, all 50 of us. So. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to jump to our haversack questions for today. And I'm going to let Adam pull those up on the screen, but I'm going to read this because this was an interesting way the questions came into us. You guys know the choose your own adventure type things. That's how these questions came in. And so it says this: beware and warning. This question is different than the other haversack questions. You and you alone are in charge of what questions get asked. There are dangers, choices, adventures, and consequences. You must use all your numerous talents and podcasting savvy. The wrong question choice could end in disaster, even continuity issues. But don't despair. At any time, you can go back and make another choice after the path of your podcast and change its results. So that's page 1. It says, if you've already answered the following questions in episode 4, scroll to page 3. If not, boldly proceed with this question. Which of the GM hats are both of you inexperienced in, and how do you go about improving your skill in that hat? So we kind of maybe talked a little bit about this. This is the first question. Which of the GM hats are we inexperienced in? I would say my least experience maybe is with the props. I find the hardest time in that, and I think it's for me, it's a matter of time. How can you get better at it? Have more time. get more time in your day. No, how can you get better at it? I think it's kind of thinking prior to the day of the gaming about what you're going to be doing, and being able to like put together the stuff around the room. I'm not, soundtrack stuff. All of that comes to me the moment I'm sitting down. I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if we had this, but I have done none of the pre-planning. And so it's not going to happen. And so instead I rely on my voices and my posture and my storytelling and the stuff I can like paint in their imagination, because I just don't do very well at pre-planning. So I think the way you get better at it is become a better pre-planner somehow. That's not very good advice, but what about you, Adam? Which one's your least experience? I know it's not that entertainer, because you do better at that than me.
It's like, it's pieces of things. I still like, it almost gets busted apart for me, because I feel like in all of these I have spurts. So, like the entertainer thing, going back to this game we're in now, the campaign we're in now, it's like when we first started, I went through and I made this whole playlist of music, and I uploaded stuff onto Roll20 to put into the game. And now we're a lot of sessions in, and I'm like, man, I play that same song every time we have a battle.
I know the song he's talking about, but I was thinking of the one he always plays whenever things get like, I don't even know what it is, but it's that.
Yeah. I have it titled Solemn and Curious. But yeah, it's like, there's a point where it's like everybody's probably really tired of this music. So, and I'm like, man, I need to fix that. But 20 minutes before game time is not the time to be trying to do that. So a lot of times that gets put off. So I think like it is that time, and it may be, I think for me, having a specific, I need to do better at like, hey, this is like an hour, maybe in the evening, we're just hanging out, kids are asleep, that I can think at least on this stuff, or I can sit on the couch while we're watching a show and like put some music into Roll20, or like bring up some maps or that. So I'm not as good about like scheduling those things. It's kind of in the moment. And it works the same way with the story stuff. I posted a thing on our Instagram about just like game prep this week. And it's like, that is a really helpful thing for me, is to be able to just get things down on paper or in like a Google Doc or something. And like, these are the checkpoints that I really want to make sure to hit before game time. But I do a lot about like that in my head, where it's like, I'm mulling over things for 6 days, and then it's day of, and I'm like, all right, got to get all these things, these things I've been thinking about, or I've been taking screenshots of pictures on my phone all week, and now I got to upload those kind of things. And so I do think maybe that intentionality, I'm not really answering the question, but the intentionality of time to get better of those inexperienced things, or just things that we haven't put the time into. I would like to practice more voices. That's the thing that like for a long time I was just like, I'm not doing it because I can't make it happen. And I'll try, but it's always that like real bad Irish accent that comes out. And then I forget like, oh, that's not actually what they're supposed to sound like. So I think even just the, some of those little things of just practicing more and more to make it work. So that's me.
All right. Well, you arrive at the next question, shivering in anticipation for what the listeners have thought up to this time. Booting up Gmail, you're greeted with the following question. How do you both deal with power players? It can be hard not to feel like it's the DM versus the player sometimes, right? Where their character happens to be perfectly attuned to everything you throw at them. How do you deal with power players? I'm going to let you start this one, Adam. How do you deal with somebody who just seems like no matter what you bring up, they've got it in the bag?
Right. I looked at this question earlier for a while, and first of all, like I still will hold to, I am not going to be against my players. That's not what I'm interested in, kind of thing. Like I don't want that that to come from this side of the table, as far as like if there's like hostile, it's not like real hostility, or shouldn't be, but even like mechanically, I don't want to like be an enemy of my players kind of thing. So I think it's really important to like come from that stage of, and we've talked about it where, you know, it's like Matthew is a flying character. It's like, well, what I don't want to do is petrify him every single time that, you know, we have an encounter. Like, oh, so every kobold, goblin, and orc know how to like cast petrify. So, but there are times when to do that, you know, and that was, I actually can't remember if we talked about this, but there was, you know, that scene in our game recently where like he was flying and this creature could make a ice wall / dome, and it could like, it caught you, you know, in that. And that did cause like you had to do something to get out of it before you could really engage again. So I think there's like creative ways to mess with people a little bit, even if they're like powered in ways that maybe the other group isn't. But you don't want to do that always, you know, because it's targeting and you don't want to be like targeting players. I do think there's something to say about like just communication, you know, where if somebody, at least, and maybe I'm coming from a place of privilege with our like table, but I feel like at our table, if I'm like, man, this person's like 5 times more powerful somehow than everybody else, like we should have a conversation of maybe like, hey, like, is there a way that you could leverage that like to supplement your party, you know, to, or help them along. But I know we've had a conversation constantly about like when people, it's more on the other side where it's like, man, that person's like super weak. Like they don't do a lot of damage, or like sometimes just like, why are the rolls so bad? You know, it's like you can't like fix that necessarily, but that's kind of the flip of that coin for me, is like, how do you raise people up, you know, too, of power wise. It's like, okay, they've been like lagging for whatever reason. Like, is there an item that can help them kind of feel like they're doing? But you brought up something a while ago, Matthew, that was like, what are people's motivations anyway? You know, it's like we brought up Evan, you know, and I feel like he's like to supplement, and supplement's not the right word, but like boost other people, get items that would like help other people or protect other people. And that was fun, you know, and I know people who are like, man, I don't want anything to do with that. So I think like the motivations kind of thing too, is maybe the rest of the table doesn't care if like this one person is like killing things all the time, you know? And so there's just some things I think to think about, but communication at the table or with people outside of the table is really important.
Yeah. And I think we're kind of spoiled in that we have honest players. And so we don't have to worry about them like kind of cheating or fibbing about the things they can do or what they had prepared or any of that stuff. But I know that there are people out there who you play in games where there are people who, like, no matter what you seem to pull out, it's like, oh yeah, I had this prepared and it's the perfect thing. And you always have to wonder. And so I think there can be some, either you try to, like, you know, somehow say, hey, what's everybody have prepared tonight as we start? Although that can feel like you're checking on them to see what you can throw at them that they don't have, which again, you don't want to be against your players. Maybe better is to have a variety of, you know, say somebody who, yeah, they're always, you know, it seems like no matter what power you pull out, they're like, oh yeah, I was already like, I had resistance to fire already on today. Well, just have like 2 or 3 different elements that are going to come out. One of them's, they can't be prepared for all of them. And then you can kind of roll that way. But also, I had another thought, and I think it just slipped my mind. Oh no, it's that idea that, you know, maybe there is one guy who's like super strong. He's like the min maxer, and his dude's just powerful. You know, he's powered this guy perfectly. Well, let that guy have people to wipe out, but have other things. Don't just have one bad guy every time. You know, the bad guy comes. Oh, this guy destroys him. This bad guy comes, that guy destroys him again, and the other players aren't getting to do anything. Well, there can be multiples. You can have a horde, and maybe the biggest, strongest, baddest thing. This guy's going to go after it because that's what he wants to prove himself. But then there's also, like 2 or 3 over here, like getting this woman and her baby, and somebody's got to protect them. Or there's, a whole bunch of stuff happening, and everybody's got to go somewhere and fight. And so you get to kind of shape that battlefield a little bit and give the power guy his power, but also give other people stuff. Don't make it just, I've seen GMs do this in the past. They plan one red dragon against everybody, and then like one dude's doing all the damage and everybody else can't hit him. Well, that's not the best. And they forget you can vary your enemies and it just takes some creativity. Okay, so you got this dragon and that guy is like coming right after him, but he also has this ice elemental and this like hexing fairy, or who knows, I'm just making up words right now, but different types of enemies that can come all at the same time. He can't take them all on. So
yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, I jumped in there. That's the thing I was thinking about too, is just like the variation of, you have like frontline fighters, you have archers shooting over the top of them, you have magicians, like in different places, and that does mix up the thing. But then kind of reiterating what you're saying, but even like the environmental things, there may be something that's going on in the scene that's maybe boosting these creatures, or there's like a danger, like you said, like the woman and her baby being attacked. It's like that's something we need to deal with, and it's not necessarily just like hack and slash, but it's like, how do I fix this kind of thing? We need to get that door open while we're fighting these people off. So that the rogues over there like doing some disable device or like dexterity checks, kind of things to get that open while the rest of them are fighting things so that you can get through that kind of stuff. I think it adds interest to the scene anyway, but that can help, I think, with the power playing thing. And even, I'm thinking about like 5e, I'm going to pick on Matthew, but it's like, okay, artillerist. Is that what you are? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think it was slash fighter. So you have like a lot. So even if you go crazy, maybe 5 shots around. I should know this, but there's these.
I should too.
and again, that's not every time, but that's like you go crazy. You do your
if I do surge. The action surge, and if I'm hasted and I do all my stuff, I could I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots plus my cannon, and it's like that's a lot.
Yeah. So that can get crazy, but also like, well, if I only put 3 people out there, like you said, it's like the one drag. It's like you have one thing. That's going to be pretty hard on that one enemy. As soon as your turn goes, it's like going to be pretty much. It's going to be pretty shot. But having that varied battlefield. I love controllers as a player, and I think like controllers. Again, you're not wanting to pick on people, but like having a controller on the field on the foe side, I think is really helpful too, whether it's like throwing up walls that cause problems or, entangling a group of people, or sometimes stunning people, or paralyzing them, like whatever that looks like. Those things I think can play into that too, where it's like, okay, multiple people have to be doing multiple things, not just everybody attacking one, because that's not really that interesting. Even if everybody's even, it's still, if you just like all line up in a circle around something and hit it until it falls down, it's not always that interesting anyway, so yeah. So those are some ideas I have, I guess.
Well, our adventure ends. Congratulations. Having answered one of these questions or both, you fulfilled your quest and satisfied your listeners. You both gain 300 XP. Sincerely, Wataya Hotel. Is that what it is?
Wataya.
Yeah. Wataya. A hotel? Wataya Hotel Hey, I think that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thanks for joining us on Rise of the GM. Join us next time because we've got more good content coming up, and we're excited to talk to you about all of it. Thanks.
Have a great week.